The best open model in the world right now isn't from a company called OpenAI, it's of course from a Chinese lab, and this one is GLM 5.2 from z.ai. This model is seriously impressive, matching GPT 5.5 on certain benchmarks, and there's even a category where it appears to be beating Fable, all while being MIT licensed open weight. Let's check it out. So GLM 5.2 is a 744 billion total parameter model with 40 billion active parameters, and it's actually the same size as its predecessor GLM 5.1, which is why it's very impressive that they made such a leap on the intelligence index from artificial analysis. This is a combined score across a bunch of benchmarks, so reasoning, coding, science, the whole lot. GLM 5.2 here got a score of 51, which is 11 ahead of its previous iteration, and the top open model by a pretty healthy margin. You can see Qwen 3.7 is next, then Minimax M3, followed by Kimi K2.6. This actually places it in the same realm as Gemini 3.5 Flash and GPT 5.4 on a max effort, which is pretty insane, and on a few of the benchmarks included in this index, like GPT Val, actually outscores GPT 5.5. If we focus on coding specifically, it's still great. On the coding index, it scores the same as Gemini 3.1 Pro and actually beats Sonnet 4.6, and it isn't even that far off the top frontier models. It's also a fair bit ahead of Kimi K2.7 code, which is their newest model, which I know a lot of people, myself included, are big fans of. I've just always found the Kimi models have a really nice feel to them. Outside of the coding index, another benchmark that people seem to like a lot these days is Deep SWE. So if we take a look there, it actually outscores Opus 4.7 on a medium effort. That is genuinely super impressive. It is worth noting here though that not every single model has been tested on this one, and the harness used was actually Claude code. You just do a bit of API trickery to point to z.ai instead of Anthropic. The final set of benchmarks I like are design arenas, and this is where things get interesting. GLM 5.2 just took first place overall on Design Arena's single-turn HTML web design leaderboard, becoming the first model ever to beat the Claude line, including Fable 5. It seems this may have been a focus area of the model, as a further investigation by Design Arena seems to show that GLM 5.2 has a strong set of expert templates that avoid common AI anti-patterns, so you should get less purple gradients, and it also seems to work really well with common libraries like Chart.js, three.js, and Tailwind. It does come with a little trade-off that it's a bit slower, but I'll come back to that later. It's also not number one everywhere on Design Arena. It sits second on Game Dev, Data Viz, and 3D, and fourth when it comes to UI components, but that is still super impressive. I thought I'd try this out on a few demo apps then, and the first one was actually recreating linear, but one of the annoying things about GLM 5.2, which is a bit of a disadvantage, is it only accepts text modalities, so you can't upload a screenshot and say recreate this. So what I actually did was send a screenshot to Claude and said give me a prompt to recreate this, and that is the prompt I've ended up giving GLM 5.2. Regardless of that, the results I got back were super impressive. On the left here, I've got the real linear web page, and on the right here, we have the GLM recreation. You can see it got the overall elements right, and for the screenshot here, it actually just recreated the UI, which I think was very cool. As we scroll down, you can see that it got overall the feel of the linear website, and I do think this looks really good. So it does have some strong UI design skills. Obviously, it's not perfect since it couldn't take in a screenshot, so it's sort of doing this as a recreation of that text prompt that I showed you, but this web page looks really nice. For comparison, on the left here, I have what Claude Opus 4.8 gave me with the exact same prompt, and this one is Kimi K2.7 code, and again, they all did a pretty good job of recreating the website just from that prompt, and I actually think I might like Kimi K2.7's the most. It just has sort of the overall best feel, and it looks the most complete in my opinion. Next up, I then thought it'd be good to give these models a new website that it probably hasn't seen before, as linear is probably in the training data of a lot of these models. So I just said design and build a beautiful single page website for a fictional product called North Star. It's an AI powered personal planning app. You can see there's also some design direction down here, like we want a hero section, some social proof, pricing section, all of the usual things. And down here, the design direction is clean, premium SaaS aesthetic, soft gradients, strong typography, rounded cards, and so on. This is the result that I got back from two of the models, and I'll tell you which is which at the end here, but you can see as we scroll down, I think this looks really nice, and I think it's done a pretty good job. It's a pretty basic startup website with your normal pricing section and so on. And same on the right over here. I do maybe like this style a little bit more, but you can see it has gone for that sort of purple gradient AI look, but I think there's just something about this website that looks a little cleaner and more complete to me, but that is completely opinionated. If you have a favorite one, let me know in the comments below, and also subscribe while you're there. The one on the left here was actually GLM 5.2, and this one was Claude Opus 4.8. For completion, this is what Kimi K2.7 code gave me, and I do think this one does fall into that sort of AI look and feel with these purple gradients. It's a little similar to the Claude one, just with less animations and less polish. I also quickly wanted to see here what GLM 5.2 would do if I gave it no design direction, so I've just given it the initial part of the prompt. And I don't think the output looks bad, but I'm not sure that I can agree with Design Arena that this doesn't have the usual AI look. This is really using those purple gradients to the max. For the next test, I then thought I'd test them out on one-shotting three.js applications, and I simply said build a three.js game where I can race an F1 car around Silverstone. And you can see this one got to work here, and this took overall about 10 minutes if we scroll all the way down to the bottom, used 40,000 tokens and cost 32 cents. This is the output that GLM 5.2 gave us then. You can see it says Silverstone F1 and start your engine. By the way, Lewis Hamilton just won for Ferrari. That's absolutely awesome. I'm glad to see we've got a red car here as Ferrari as well, although we're definitely a little slower than I would like to be. And one thing I'm noticing here is if I press A, I seem to go right and D left, so the controls are inverted, but not on the arrow keys, it seems. And this definitely isn't the speed that I would like a Ferrari to go around Silverstone at. But I mean, it's not too bad for a first pass. Actually seems I go quicker if I reverse, so maybe if I just reverse around the track, that would be better. I tried the same test with Kimi K2.7 code, but I didn't actually get back a working example in a single prompt. Somewhere down here, I had a few console errors that were constantly looping, so I did have to tell it that I had a few errors, but then it did fix those in the second prompt, and you can see this one actually used more tokens at 110,000 and cost 81 cents. The result I got back was also a little less playable. It seems we have a little more speed, but our turning circle is terrible. I don't think I've ever seen an F1 driver turn like this, and we can also drive through a few buildings here. It's cool that it got the names of the corners at Silverstone, but there's also no track. It's seemingly just bollards. The final one then is Claude Opus 4.8, and this one is a little more playable, besides the fact that I don't think there's just trees in the middle of the Silverstone track. I mean, last time I checked, there wasn't. And yeah, it's overall a fairly good game. We've got some camera controls here. My wheels, probably wouldn't like them if I was an F1 driver, but it seems to be handling all right. And the track itself, though, is also one of the most confusing tracks that I think I've ever seen anyone race around. There's a lot of overlapping going on here, and I don't actually know which way to go. But I would say that Opus 4.8 gave us the most playable demo in a single prompt. The final test I did is a little more involved. It's a front end and a back end from scratch of a personal finance management dashboard with a few features that you can see listed here. And just the general idea here is to see what stack it picks when it starts brand new, and also if it can link up a front end and a back end, all in that single prompt without any errors. Here's GLM 5.2's attempt, and I've got to say, yeah, it's a pretty basic looking dashboard. There's nothing fancy, but there's also not too many fancy things that you can do with sort of the prompt that I gave it. Everything appears to be working. I've added things to the database. I paid for my Fable 5 subscription here. All of these pages are clickable and everything does transfer between them. When I click on these, I have tested it. So it seems to have done a very good job from that single prompt. I'm always curious what stack it picked as well. And this one went with a Next.js application and it used Prisma for the database. And we can see that in here. We also have a development database. I probably would have preferred that it used Drizzle and maybe TanStack, but I can't really complain. I gave it no direction. This is actually what Kimi K2.7 code gave me, and you can see it's almost the exact same application. It's just, I would say, not as fancy. They've definitely got some of the same templates in their training somewhere that looks exactly like this. And again, yeah, I can't complain too much about this, but it's missing sort of all of the extras with the buttons to be able to transfer. I've got the add account features and add transactions. They do work, but I just say the overall UI of this and the user experience is a little worse since it doesn't have that information clickable up here. The default stack it chose, I would also argue, is a little worse. It used React here with just a normal Vite setup and React router, which I have no issue with, but the backend, it did go with Express. And if we take a look at the actual database file, it's just using Node's SQLite to write to it and writing in the schemas in the text here, which I think is going to be a little less scalable. If I was completely vibe coding and didn't know anything about the stack, I would probably want GLM 5.2, but if I was using Kimi K2.7 code, I probably would have given it directions to use Drizzle, Next.js, and various other things as well, so it just varies based on what you like. Talking of opinionated as well, this is actually what Claude Opus 4.8 gave me. It definitely went with a completely different style to the ones that we've seen before, but it's sort of this style of text that Claude seems to like at the moment. It's definitely what they put in the training data or are pushing it towards. And all of this works really well, and yeah, I think it looks really good. I'd probably prompt this to maybe use different fonts and a different color scheme, but sort of the overall base is very good. Didn't actually do separate pages for this, it just did separate sections, so maybe that's worse, but again, that comes down to the prompt. All of the features and everything like that is working. Taking a look at the actual code that Opus gave me, I actually think GLM 5.2 may have won this one. What Opus did is it just used a normal React application. It didn't even bother with React Router since it was all on that single page there. And it also went with Express for its backend. but then it didn't actually do any connection to a database. All of it is actually just an in-memory store that we can see here where it seeds the data, and it just runs all of it off of a JavaScript object, which again, probably isn't what I want if I'm going to be scaling this in the future, but does come down to the prompt. I think that's sort of my key takeaway when testing this model over the last few days. I think for a lot of tasks, you could secretly swap GLM 5.2 in the place of Sonnet or even Opus for simpler tasks, and I probably wouldn't notice. It is a really capable model, and if you give it the right steering, you get really good results. It's one of the first open models that I haven't felt like I'm fighting to use, and also one of the first open models where using it, I haven't had that feeling of, I know Claude could do this better or faster. The last things to mention then to round this out are tokens, cost, and speed. One of the downsides of GLM 5.2 could be that it's a little more token hungry when compared to other models in its class. It used an average of 43,000 tokens a task, which is more than Kimi K2.6, Minimax, and DeepSeek, but the good news is it doesn't actually cost that much. Depending on the provider, it's around $1.40 for a million input tokens and $4.40 for a million output tokens, and on the benchmarks of artificial analysis, it actually cost around 50 cents a task, and you can see this is a pretty good spot when we do cost versus intelligence. Ignore the Gemini label here, it's actually this blue dot, and you can see it's quite a crowded chart, but what this actually shows is at its intelligence level, GLM 5.2 is the cheapest model. Although I will say here, if you can take a hit to the intelligence, I do think Minimax and especially DeepSeek v4 are very good for that price. When it comes to speed, GLM 5.2 is actually not bad at all. It outperformed most of the open models near its intelligence level, so DeepSeek v4, Kimi 2.7 code, and Minimax, and it's a bit behind a frontier model like Gemini 3.1 Pro, which has the same intelligence level, but that is a frontier model, and I'd also love to see Gemini 3.5 Pro added to this list. Google, please release that. When it comes to speed as well, Design Arena actually seemingly got a bit of a different result, where they say that GLM 5.2 scores the highest on user preference of the design, but it was also the slowest out of the top models, although it is also worth noting there that all of those top models are frontier ones and not open ones. Overall, it really feels like we're at a point where these open models are, let's say, 4 to 6 months behind, so perhaps too optimistically, we could be looking at a Fable model by next year, and I mean, they themselves are actually promising by Q1, and I hate to agree with this next person on anything, but he does make a good point here that maybe on the benchmarks they could catch Fable, but actual usefulness does feel a little bit different, and this is what Anthropic is very good at. It's very rare to see him actually giving them a compliment there, but I do have to agree with that sentiment where actually using these models feels a little bit different, but I think GLM 5.2 is one of the first ones that's broken that cycle for me. I think if you told me a year ago that these open models would be anywhere near this good, I would have been absolutely shocked and probably not believed you, and I'm not actually a doomsday prepper, but I feel like with the recent Fable ban, I just want to download GLM 5.2 and store it on an SSD just in case I need it later. Let me know what you think of this model in the comments down below, and also tell me what your favorite open model is to use. While you're there, subscribe, and as always, see you in the next one.